Hello, everybody. Welcome back to The Way That I See It. But today is The Way We See It because I'm interviewing my gorgeous friend, Nikki, who has been a guest on the podcast before, but we're talking about something quite different today. So, Nikki, rather than me do you a disservice, darling, because I could talk about one thing and you're like, no, that's not me today, because we all change who we are every single day. I personally believe that. Tell everybody a little bit about you, maybe actually just in context of what we're going to talk about today. Maybe talk a little bit about you and just introduce yourself, because otherwise I'll do you a disservice.
Okay, I am Nikki Wetherall, sometimes known as Celestial Soul Coach on Instagram. Mum, wife, sex geek, healing, passionate, like Lucy, a multi-passionate with work too. I've got many faces, many roles. And today we're going to talk about the more woo-woo side of things, a little bit of science in there too, because it's really important that what we talk about is backed up by science. But something that really, like we've just said off camera, is going to be like this. It's been around for a long time, but it's coming more into the kind of mainstream, if you like.
Yeah, totally. And so for context of everybody kind of listening, obviously if you're a regular podcast listener, you know, I've talked a lot about how over the previous kind of 6 to 9 months, I've been working on restoring my central nervous system. And so what that's meant to me is that cognitively, I've processed a lot of the more difficult things that have happened to me. I'm always reluctant to use the words trauma, although in the context of central nervous system healing, trauma just means anything your body has stored. It doesn't necessarily have a negative connotation to it. So I feel like I've cognitively dealt with my more negative experiences. I feel like I'm very easily can shift a limiting belief, or, you know, on the surface, I'm very much there. And actually what I worked out was that deep down, it was kind of like end of summer last year, mid to end of summer, that I just had this overwhelming feeling of not feeling safe, and that I was trying to pursue all these outwardly things, not necessarily out of a place of desire. And you guys know that desire for me is the number one priority, is that when we act out of desire, we're always going to be in alignment. I was actually acting out of this need to feel safe. And what I worked out was that although logically and cognitively I was safe, you know, I have a house and a mortgage and savings and, you know, a relationship, and my life is, you know, outwardly pretty perfect. Actually, deep down, there was a story running in the background of my life that made out like I was only safe if. But the thing is, cognitively, I knew that that was just a story. So why was I allowing it to run the show? And the answer was because my central nervous system was imprinted, right? If you've ever watched Twilight, I love the word imprint, right? And if you, my central nervous system was basically living in the past. So my therapist said this one line to me and it changed the rest of my life. So 2 lines. First one was, the story of your life is stored in your body. And I was like, oh yeah, can feel that. And the second one is, we will always recreate situations that feel like home. Mm-hmm. And so the home bit for me was what was happening was that because life was so good, like life was genuinely so good, but whenever in my early years, you know, childhood and teen years, whenever life was really good, something unpredictable would happen. And it turns out now that my dad is neurodiverse, so we know that now. And had we known that then, we would have, the unpredictability of life at that time, right, in that stage of life, would have meant that we understood that life was going to be unpredictable, but we didn't. And so as a child, when things are unpredictable, you create stories and paradigms, and you take so much on energetically about what's happening around you. And that is what feels like home. So home just means what feels familiar, what feels regular, what feels like you're used to. And this is why a lot of people they can cognitively understand they're worth more or do better, but it's why they don't ever leave those paradigms and stories, because they feel like home. So when I wrap my head around this, I asked my therapist this very big question. So how the fuck do I fix it? Because we know me, I'm like, right, okay, great. Know the problem, cool, tick it off, event manager mode, switched on. And she said, somatic healing. And I went, Google, what is somatic healing? And basically it's body work. It's releasing trauma from, that's where I describe it. It's releasing trauma from the body, is reconditioning and restoring the central nervous system so that it feels safe. And so that is what I have been working on for the past 6 to 9 months. And it's a never ending journey. If you're a very sensitive person, if you have a sensitive nervous system for whatever reason, you know, and one of the reasons is I was quite sick as a child. Like I said, unpredictable parenting, they can be really common reasons. It means that you are probably going to have to do this work on an ongoing basis forever. So this is what led me, and obviously Nikki and I have been friends for a long time, and this is what led me. So Nikki posted on Facebook about doing a cacao ceremony and sound bath at the spring equinox. Now, you guys know that I had Reiki in December, and my Reiki practitioner said to me, there will be new life in spring and soul elevation. And I went, all right. I was like, okay, sure, we'll wait and see. Obviously, we ended up getting a puppy, so there's the new life for you. And the soul elevation was definitely exactly what I needed. He told me to hibernate over winter, and there would be soul elevation and new life in spring. So when I saw this spring equinox, I was like, okay, that feels aptly timed. So, Nikki, for anyone listening, what on earth is a cacao ceremony and a sound bath? Because the truth of it is, although I kind of knew what it was, I was just going to turn up and hope for the best.
So cacao, I actually I don't tend to use the word ceremony. You won't see it in my advertising. I use the term I use is sound bath with cacao, because I believe that the term ceremony should be sacred and for the tribes where it came from. So a big thing for me is appropriation and use of words, etc. So although sometimes I will slip up through old habits that I've been relearning, I try really, really hard to hammer this home about appropriation, because cacao isn't from our land. Cacao is from the Amazon. I use very specific cacao from a specific place because I know the lineage. I know that the people that harvest it are paid an overly fair wage. They're looked after, their dignity is respected, their privacy is respected. They're not printed on websites anywhere so that their pictures are used for marketing, for example. So it's really important that it's respected. So cacao is the rawest form of chocolate. It's what you would have any chocolate bar made out of, but by the time you get it as a traditional like chocolate bar, it's been heavily processed and has got loads of other stuff mixed in it. So cacao is the rawest form. And I wrote down a few things because it's a lot to remember, and I wanted to get the names right. My brain sometimes goes on overwhelm, but basically it's really high in magnesium, which is really great for recovery and sleep. And it contains tryptophan, which converts to serotonin, which we know as the happy hormone, happy chemical. Helps you to manage stress. It's got lots of health benefits, from improved mood. It helps you feel calm. It helps neural activity. It's anti-inflammatory, and it contains things like copper, iron, potassium, zinc, B12. So it's got this whole host as in its rawest form, as a kind of really full of health benefits. Basically, what happens in a cacao, what people call cacao ceremony, is that it's taken in a high dosage. So you would take a specific amount of cacao per person, and if you are someone that's really new to it, you might have a slightly lower dose. People don't always drink it all. And basically it has a stimulating effect, not in the same way that caffeine does, like in coffee, but it has this stimulating effect. And they say cacao is a heart opener. So that's kind of like the sciencey bit. Heart opens in the sciencey way that it widens the blood vessels. But actually, we're talking about a legal medicine here. It's a legal plant medicine. It's not like other it's not a psychedelic, but it's not like mushrooms, for example. But it is a plant medicine, and it comes from the Amazon, where it's been used for thousands and thousands and thousands of years. And I don't even begin to comprehend the magic that comes from cultures that we don't understand fully, other than through Western eyes. But essentially, it creates this really heart-opening effect. It cultivates a nurturing, a self-care, and the way I hold the space is what contributes to people's experience. That you could go and drink that. I've drunk it before and gone to the gym because I did it in like a ceremonial way, but I wanted to like experience, because when you do movement with cacao, it increases its response. So I've gone for a walk before, and I've just felt like the most blissful walk. So then I just thought, I'll see what happens, just doing my own little experiment of how compassionate can I be to myself in the gym, you know, when you've been on these journeys with body image and all of that kind of thing. Just had this like really profound and slightly high workout, which I don't recommend, by the way. Don't do it. But that's the power of what is essentially a hot chocolate, is that, you know, it's opening your blood vessels, it's creating this kind of bliss feeling. There's actually one of the properties has got the word ananda in it, which literally translates to bliss in Sanskrit. So ancient medicine, to be massively respected, and when used in the right space at the right dosage, can create these huge insights and awakenings and help us find the wisdom and the knowledge. But I would like to stress that in what people might call like a ceremony or a space holding, that there's this huge amount of guidance that goes into that too, apart from the drinking of it, to help people have the right experience. Does that make sense? Obviously, you know, because you've been there, but for anyone not listening, they don't know what the procedure is.
Yeah, totally get what you mean about ceremony. And like you actually talked about that on the night as well, which I loved. And it's just like you say, it's the appropriation of basically using it to open us up to then what was going to happen next. And I think it was really interesting for me. So I personally loved it. I was like, I love I'm a rich chocolate girl. So everyone was having like a bit of sweetener in there. So I was like, I'm going to have it straight. I was like, and I loved it. It was amazing. When it was finished, I was like, oh, is that it?
Yeah, it's naturally really bitter. It's
but I love it.
Yeah, and you can, so I personally make it with a non-dairy milk. I mostly use oat milk, and then people add in like sometimes people add in a lot of chili, which again has its own compound effects. I don't, because I personally don't like it, and a lot of other people don't like it either. But yeah, cinnamon, natural sweetener like agave syrup or something like that.
It was so nice though. I loved it. But I wouldn't say that like, it's hard because it's hard to isolate how you felt because of the simple thing. Because obviously the whole environment, like you say, was such a holding space environment. So, you know, everything was candlelit, everything was like really relaxing. The music was really amazing, like real journey with the music. So it's really hard for me to isolate, I guess, the cacao bit, other than that it was really nice. But what I would say is that I definitely felt like, so I'm very transparent with everyone who listens to this. I've taken a lot of drugs in my life. So not for a long time. Like I've been clean for like, and I say clean, that sounds like I was an addict, but as in like I've not used anything since, oh God. I mean, we're talking like 8 years at least, maybe 6-7 years. Anyway, a while, right? Because it just doesn't interest me. I don't feel the need to escape my life. I'm very happy. I don't feel the need to run away from anything. So I've also experimented with microdosing. So last summer I microdosed for 3 months, just in the early stages of this central nervous system restoration, to see how I felt. And the way I would compare it, because some people don't feel anything of microdosing, by the way, I did on a very low dose because I'm small, right? So I would compare it to the day after I'd microdosed. I was just a bit more chill. Like I was just a bit like, what is that phrase? Is it mañana? Is that just like, like a bit like, you know, like just like, sure, whenever, no problem, which is not my natural character type. So that's how I describe how I felt. But the bit I loved the most was like, and I'm not a yogi by any stretch, was I liked the yoga. I really enjoyed the movement and how like that brought the feeling. So how you said about the movement, you know, helps the cacao work through the body, because obviously it gets the heart rate moving, and obviously that gets pumped around the blood. So, you know, it creates that state of bliss. But why is it then used in a healing sense? So I know you talked about like the chemical compounds and the science bit, but I guess why pair that with something like, in fact, before we ask you that question, let's talk a little bit about the sound bowls, because obviously there's lots of different types. And obviously this type is crystal, which is intense. I personally found it intense. So I'm really interested to give people a little bit of background about that, and then maybe we can talk about why you put the two together.
Sure. So sound healing, again, is another modality that has been used for thousands and thousands of years. It comes in various forms, all different kinds of instruments. If you think about I know, I'm just going to use an example I think Lucy would totally relate to. The euphoric feeling of being at a rave and your tune comes on, right? You physically feel, just thinking about it, I can feel something happening in my body. You know, there's an openness that happens. And if you think about how our bodies are made up, I remember exactly this science lesson at school, and I think maybe because some part of my being knew that I was going to get to this point with sound, was that, you know, like our cells literally vibrate. The cells inside us vibrate. Everything around us, I'm sure everyone here has heard Lucy talk about vibration, and everything vibrates at certain levels. So sound works with the vibration of our body to help us release what we're holding on to reset. I don't like to use terms. I'm just going to turn this WhatsApp off for me a minute, because it might, there we go, it's going to buzz otherwise, it's very loud. Where was I? Sorry.
Vibration, sound
vibration. So each different instrument hits us on a different wavelength, and I don't like to use things like, I don't like to use the word chakras anymore. Used it loads in the past. I'm a Reiki practitioner, I'm a yoga teacher. I feel like they're appropriation of language that it doesn't necessarily serve us, when my main job as a somatic sexologist teaches us to come into our body. So why not use the anatomical terms? Why not use the physical parts in our body, so that we can really put our mind to the physical connection? So some texts that I've read, they talk about the alignment of energy and the connection with our different chakras, etc., energy centers in the body. But essentially, we all vibrate, and sound helps clear, move, shift energy. Then what happens with these events is I always ask everyone to set an intention before they come. Then we intention set in the room. So we're already kind of, if you think about how we use the laws of attraction and manifestation, we're effectively putting something into our mind that we want to create. Then by using the words as it's happened already, we're creating, there's a physiological thing happening with sound, and there's the seeds that I've planted along the way, with the emails people receive leading up to it, and the words that I use through it, with the connection to the body, because through this event I use very specific ways of speaking to help people connect to their body. You've then got this whole process where we're preparing ourselves to release, to let go. We're setting the intention of what we want to welcome in. And then you've got this ancient sound healing, which literally is vibrating through your body and working again its magic, like the cacao does, like these magical spiritual properties that perhaps we'll never really understand beyond the kind of sciencey aspects. Certainly not, I'm no shaman, I'm no Tibetan monk that sat on a mountain for 21 days waiting for enlightenment, you know. So we can understand that sound changes how we feel on the most simplistic level, as how you might listen to your favorite tune, it creates an emotion, but this actually hits us in that and deeper way through vibration. And you can physically feel like some notes will really resonate with your body more than others. And so I actually usually use gongs in my sound healing events. My gong practitioner moved to Devon, and I found it hard to find someone that's nearby that I can that's affordable, so I can bring really good quality practitioner, but also make it financially accessible for people and create a really high quality event. There's a few things there, and I've known Anna for a really long time. We did our Reiki 2 practitioner healing together, and she's just the most beautiful soul, which was why I asked Anna to bring her crystal bowls. I've done crystal bowls with her before. My experience of the two different things is the crystal bowls hits completely differently. It's intense, but without this sense of like pinning you to the floor. The sound tends to move through you in slightly more subtle ways, but still still powerfully. I don't know how else to say it. Whereas the gongs, they move from like this gentle, a bit like the crystal bowls. Sometimes the sound's really gentle, and then it will become more and more intense. But if you imagine that translated into a great big gong, it can be like a bang. And people liken that to being kind of pinned to the floor as a bit more grounding, a little bit more of a heavier kind of sound. And the journeys are different either way. They don't seem to make any difference. I always trust that whatever people are meant to experience in that time, whatever they're meant to release, wherever their intentions are, whatever they're actually ready for. So we can't release anything, we can't welcome anything in that we're not ready for. So that's how I've fast forwarded a little bit, haven't I?
No, it's great.
That's how the two things came about. So my story with it was, essentially, I went to this cacao ceremony by a Mexican shaman. And I don't really know what I was expecting when I went there, but I turned up in this like cold village hall in West Sussex, and I sat on the floor for a couple of hours with no pad, no mat, no candles. It was like hall lights, and I was like, I've been doing like events for a long time. I know what makes a great event, and also I've learned over the years how to really, I'm not sure what I feel about the term holding space, because some people don't really understand what that means, but create an event that is emotive, that is transformational, that allows people to feel safe and held. And so I was like, the cacao is great, it's amazing. And if I was going to go to something, what would I want to create? I'd want to have a cocoon. I want to be nesting and feel supported. I want to be warm. I want the lighting to be calming. As someone that has had a very activated nervous system in the past, that you'd only have to walk into a room when I wasn't expecting you and I'd jump out of my skin. Like Lucy said earlier, trauma isn't the thing that happens to us, it's how our nervous system responds to that thing. So I always say your goldfish could die or your grandmother could die. It's irrelevant of the thing. The important factor is how you feel about things, how your body ends up responding, whether it's fight, freeze, disassociation.
It's interesting that you say that, actually, and there's something you said. I just want to take us back. Said you only get what you're ready for, and obviously, I messaged you the day after and was like, "This is what I feel like happened." So I feel like my intention, and I don't mind showing this because it's not overly personal. My intention was just to let go of anything that was going to stop me from going to what my, and this is personal, I'm not sure, but my next level is. It's the next level goal, I guess is the word, manifestation, creation, whatever, that I really desire. Not want from a place of lack, not want from a place of need, but just genuinely desire, genuinely believe I'm worthy of, genuinely feel abundant about. And I'm like, that's who I want to be. That's where I want to be. That's who I want to be. The signs are there. Some of the outward manifestations are on their way. And I just felt like there was some trauma stories. That's the only way I can describe it. Is like, almost felt like stories running through me, but not me knowing what they were. It's so weird. It wasn't like it felt stuck. I didn't feel stuck, like heavy. Yeah. I felt like there was always something moving that was kind of like, I don't know how to describe it. It would be like getting in your car and you just can't get it off the drive. And that's how I would feel a lot of the time. And I'd maybe like bump started down the road a bit, but never like get the engine to kick in. And I was like, come on. But that's because I'm so used to burning myself out. I'm so used to the, like burnout. Okay, I'm dead, I'm burnt out, I'm broken down, that's it. And I've had 3 nervous breakdowns in my life and I'm 35, right? So not surprising now I understand everything. Right? I'm like, oh, that's because I keep burning myself out.
Yeah.
So, but every time that's happened, then when I restore myself, the burst of energy that comes from that, from people who have, when you can tap into your nervous system fully, and people with sensitive nervous systems, naturally very empathic people too, are so freaking powerful. They are unbelievably, exceptionally powerful when they align themselves. And so what I felt like was I was just slightly misaligned, like I hadn't been to the chiropractor for a while, kind of energy. And so I went with just the intention of, whatever this is, I just want to let it go. I don't care what it is. I don't need to understand it for the first time ever. I don't need to understand it. I don't need to know where it's come from. I don't need to know why. I just want to let it go. And I felt like that happened quite early on in the process of the event. And then I actually found the sound bowls, and I said to you tonight, almost like paralyzing is a very dramatic word, but like you said about feeling like pinned, I didn't feel pinned flat. I felt pinned like this.
Like,
and I thought,
yeah, in.
Yeah, and like it was almost like I rolled into the recovery position. I was like, I felt like I was like this. And I think it's because whatever the intention was, I had to clear, and it just showed me that there is more, but I'm not ready. But that's okay. And for the first time, I was okay with the fact that I'm not ready. And as Abraham Hicks says, my whole journey now is just getting ready to be ready, to be ready, to be ready, to be ready, rather than needing to be ready.
Mm-hmm.
So that was kind of my like experience of it all. But I've only ever experienced gongs in a very small way when I've had Reiki, or when I've had any kind of energy work, I guess. It's not just Reiki. And I've only really had it localized. So like I saw somebody when my shoulder was really hurting, not to do with my shoulder, weirdly. At the time, they didn't know my shoulder was hurting, but they identified there was something going on with my shoulder and my neck. I had Reiki, and then they did some gong work around this area, and I felt a lot lift. So my only experience of sound is clearing, is very much like releasing.
You can literally use sound to cleanse a room. So, like some people use smoke clearing, or usually the term they use is smudging. Don't use that anymore. Smoke clearing, smudging is an appropriation. Sound does the same. So like I've got a little set of symbols that you can use that, and it helps clear the room. So
Can I get a triangle like at school? Like
you can get a triangle. You can even get crystal triangles. Yeah, I kid you not.
Can you send me one? Can you send me one that's actually good? Because otherwise I'll buy something off Amazon and I won't know what it is.
Don't buy one off Amazon.
I'm like, because I feel like my house is definitely a safe space. We have this house is a good energy house. Like it's also brand new, which really helps. I think clean energy. But I would just love, like when I've been in a room, or like we've had a heavy conversation, or like, I don't know, you've had a bad day and you bitch and moan about it. I'd love to just have something that's like, ding, just like, because smoke clearing is not for me. My lungs, it's not for me. So
I actually do wonder how many like woo-woo people like me are going to end up with some form of like like if you have emphysema as a smoker, because we've sat in rooms of Palo Santo and sage and incense. I always wonder in the years to time there's going to be a increase in this.
Because sounds healthier. I'll take sound any day. So yeah, and
actually,
if you can make some recommendations, I'll put them in the links to this podcast. So if somebody's like, yes, I want to get on that, I can put them in the links to this, so then other people can go on it. So right, if somebody right now, Nikki, is like, this sounds really interesting, I feel like I'm on a growth journey, because obviously most people that listen to me, again, like you said, I only attract people that are available to hear what I've got to say. That's the truth. I have very high repeat listens, because it means that people are ready to listen to what I'm saying. They don't come in and out, they're committed, and they're all in on their growth. So with that in mind, how can somebody who's maybe been on let's say a more traditional personal development journey, like a mindset journey, like I was on, and like I very much teach, what's a good stepping stone to bring in the somatic work? And that's a big question, and I haven't prepared you for it.
Great question. I think that it's really important to remember that there is never one form of healing that is a magic fix. There isn't a magic fix. You're not broken. You don't need someone to fix you. You need to learn to re-regulate your nervous system and connect to your body and stop disassociating, and be in integrity of what you really, really desire, want, need. But that requires us to come into our body. So the alignment of kind of, well, not alignment's not the right word, but the understanding that the cognitive processing is great, counseling is great, psychotherapy, like all of those different talking modalities is great, but without the piece of the body, there will always be a section missing. So in terms of my journey, that looked like I did a fair stint in the Priory. I have done endless counseling sessions. I've seen psychologists, like I've done loads of that, and there was just something that wasn't quite missing. And actually it was, I think, partly being in the gym helped me connect to my body. Then I found yoga, which I like the physical aspect of. I have problems with the way yoga is I think it's taught from a little bit of an egocentric point of view, where it's all about the fancy poses and it makes it inaccessible. So if you can find maybe like a yoga teacher that is encouraging you into your body, that's another great start. It's a stepping stone. Then if you're ready, somatics, 100% somatic. So I'm a somatic sexologist. My passion is about helping people with their, whether it's gender, sexuality, sexual trauma recovery. Some people just, it's like body, it could be just about our bodies. So I get a little bit frustrated that so much of the personal development work, so much therapy is about everything else except sexuality. But really that's like the root of our stuff in the most part. So learning, connecting with some kind of somatic practitioner. So that might be someone that does somatic experiencing. It might be someone that does somatic body work. But finding someone that does somatic something. And if you're not ready for that, even a yoga practice that is restorative or yin, and that can be a real challenge for people. Yin and restorative may look similar, but restorative is the art of like softening and relaxing the body to calm the nervous system, whereas yin, you're still activated, you're working on deep stretches, both powerful but different.
Love that. And it's so interesting. And like I said, this is why, you know, like with my courses, I'm very much the head work, right? So I'm very much like personal development, mindset, clearing the beliefs, the stories, the narratives, the everything. But what I've gone back and done is added in to every single one of my courses a module about the necessity to restore the central nervous system. So whether you're in the money course or the confidence course or the master course or whatever you're in, right, doesn't really matter. Ultimately, it's great that you've shifted all that stuff. But now what you need to go look at is this. And I've built a little directory for everyone about like where you can go to find X, Y, and Z, because I'm not going to go and retrain. It's not going to be something I'm going to do. I'm not called to it. If I'm honest, I'm actually being really called at the moment to go and train as a therapist, which is surprising for me. I'm just going to let that sit there for a little bit. I'm like, there's more to be done here. But yeah. I feel like, you know, that's if I'm going to go anywhere, it's probably going to be there, right? Because that's natural. I'm a naturally great communicator. That my what's the word I'm looking for? My superpower is my words. That's always been the case with me. Mine is my words, and that's not necessarily my energy, if that makes sense. So I think, but I just now know that then it's a stepped process. So whether or not you start, and this is why I think a lot of people do start in the gym, like you said, like they start feeling them, they start to kind of trust themselves, they clear a lot of energy, they start to, and you know, I hate the phrase, but you know, when people lose a lot of weight, I feel like maybe they do lose the you know, we talked about that basically
the issues are in the tissues, literally.
Exactly.
So some people actually lose weight through doing somatic trauma work because you actually you're holding on to this stuff as like an armor, truly. And one of the reasons I think that my sound healing and cacao events are so powerful is because I combine the somatics, and I haven't met anyone else that did it. I mean, I'd like to, because I want to be able to be held in the same way that I hold. But so this time we did yoga. Sometimes I do more like an ecstatic dance type thing. I was really called this time to do the yoga practice. So I was combining like many different layers of my teachings, but always invited you in. So I think sometimes in anything woo-woo, whether it's, I say woo-woo not in a derogatory term, but to describe the kind of more holistic therapy aspects, kind of whether it's witchcraft type things or whether it's energy work, or I'm a fan of them all. Give them all to me. But I think that lost my train of thought is what I think.
But all I was going to say was I just feel like it's whatever you can get behind. So I think it's wherever you start is great. So if you start in psychotherapy, that's great. If you start in the gym, that's great. If you start with Reiki, that's great. If you start with cacao, and that actually, and I'm sure there are people that go to events, you know, hopefully yours, but also like yours, that maybe that's actually where they start because they're so closed off. The thought of talking to someone is so fucking terrifying that they can't do that. So I think whatever feels good. And I think what I didn't understand viscerally was how much this needed, and not not yoga and not massages, and but how much I respond to Reiki, and how much, and actually one of the things I've learned about myself, and I imagine there's a lot of high performers that will relate to this, is that when I have to do the work myself, I want to diligently do the work, right? So that's why Reiki works really well for me, because I have to surrender, because I'm not doing anything. So that's why I think I've had such great response, as in, like, I felt so different. My first Reiki was like, I cried loads. I was like, lots of black and lots of darkness. And my second Reiki, I just laughed. I was laughing my fucking head off for 40. And I was there like a naughty child, like, should I be laughing? And he was like, just enjoy yourself. But the point is, like, I respond really well because it's the only thing that allows me to surrender. So I think start where you are and just know there's a place for all of it at some point.
Absolutely. And I think a good practitioner, this is one of the most important things I will tell you. You can only work at the rate that your nervous system is ready to work. If someone is pushing you for answers, to find something, they're likely acting out of their ego, whereas a really good practitioner will always invite you in to observe, like, I'm talking in a somatic sense, what is present in your body right now. I have a client who I've worked with for 3 years, I think now. And I don't think she'll mind me saying this at all. In her first session, we spent about an hour trying to get her to focus on her big toe, because she was so disassociating so much that to actually draw her attention to one place, like her big toe in her body, was too difficult. So whereas I think, like, the Reiki is fantastic, it doesn't require you to talk. And when you're ready, come to this. Somatics isn't fast. You're never going to get some magically quick thing. And that's what high performers tend to want. They want to come in, want a really quick answer. Right, let's fix this, get it done. Job's good. And doesn't
Basically
work.
Me.
Yeah. Somatics doesn't work like that at all. It requires, and I'm really upfront with my clients with this, it requires you to be ready for slow, to be ready for still. But when we've been so activated in our nervous system, it's really difficult to allow ourselves to come into that. And it's really scary, because what are you going to find when you get there?
Do you know what you just said is so true? And actually, that you literally, my brain just went, that's why you did that. So when I think the reason that I created my courses the way that I have is that exact reason. So almost they're getting on the front end. What I've always said is, I'll give you what you want, and then I'll give you what you really need.
It's like selling fat loss when actually weight loss, when actually what you're teaching is fat loss, right?
Like it's exactly that. So, like, I'm going to give you what you want. You say, want more confidence, come do the confidence course. During the confidence course, I'm going to give you what you need, which is teaching you that deep down, the reason that you're not confident is there's a core wound going on somewhere in there. And that core wound is physically vibrating in your body somewhere. But until you can you've got to give, I think, in my experience, I've got to give high performers the work. And when you give them the work and they start plugging, ironically, it just gets slower as they get deeper and they realize they need to do this again and go again. And it's been interesting. I've got a couple of girls right now in the master course, which is very, like, progressive, and it's slowing down. And I'm like, that's not a surprise to me, because we've just peeling the onion. But that's exactly, I almost didn't know why I'd done what I'd done. And you've just clarified for me, because I've created courses for people who are high performers, because that's what I am. You can only teach what you are.
Yeah, it doesn't surprise me at all. At all. Like, when you wanted to go there, I was like, she's ready for that. And
exactly that.
It's just the stepping stone that you're ready for. And you just have to have so much compassion for the place that you're at. And if you try and push yourself, push your nervous system to a place it's not ready to, actually all you can do is, like, it's like a rubber band that's going to bounce back.
Everyone's going to listen to last week's podcast and say, oh my God, Lucy said that in last week's podcast.
Did you?
I said a bungee cord, like when you jump, it's just going to pull you right back, because whether that's your beliefs, your core wounds, or your central nervous system, unless you clear and do the work, do the healing, do the whatever word resonates, because some people really love the word work. Honestly, I just know that my life has been, my outward manifestations in my life have been amazing, and I've quantum leaped a lot of times. But where I find myself now is I know that when I'm actually able to release this band, as the Marianne Williams, is it Marianne Williamson quote goes, our greatest fear is not that we are inadequate. Our greatest fear is that we are powerful beyond measure. And where I'm at right now is the sense of knowing that the being ready to be ready to be ready is not going to be a little bump. It's not going to be, I get the car into first gear. It's going to be, boom, we're in 100 miles an hour. And so I feel like that sometimes is so terrifying, knowing that when you clear, that there is no reason to hold yourself back. There's no reason to procrastinate. There'll be no reason to not believe you're fucking capable of absolutely everything when there's no story or trauma holding you back. And I actually think that is more fucking terrifying than having the stories in the first place.
Yeah. And it goes back to like what you were saying earlier. We will do the things that keep us safe. Like if we always do something, so say we always run away when things are difficult, that might show up in different ways, like going to do a yoga course in India, or it's we will always come back to the same ways that we make ourselves feel safe until we understand that and we break those patterns.
Yeah,
totally. Have to actually find where home is, but that kind of requires getting past that step that is scary, and it requires your courage.
And this is, I talked about this the other day on Instagram about the difference between a comfort zone and a safety zone. And I think there's so much talk in the personal development space about getting out of your comfort zone, which means getting out of like your, and it does literally mean that, as in like if you're at work and you never put your hand up, and actually put yourself forward for things, there is an element there of you're not really going to move forward unless you do it. But the challenge is, unless people really understand their nervous system, sometimes we mistake the concept of a comfort zone for a safety zone. And a safety zone is something you don't want to leave unless you are leaving it in holding the space of knowing you're leaving it, and you're willing to leave it, and you're willing to see what happens, and there's a support for you if you leave it and it doesn't go well. And I think this is where sometimes broad brush personal development content makes me mad because
oh my God, I hear you. I literally think that every single person that trains to be a coach, whether it's a year-long ICF, which is what I did, or I don't know, like a shorter term thing, I actually think it's irresponsible not to do a trauma-informed practitioner training and a consent training. Without those two things, you will be re-traumatizing your clients.
Yeah, or projecting. And so one of the things that I've learned is that I have just asked myself this question whenever I'm doing a call, and I don't do many calls, right? I don't have many active clients, right? And is asking myself, am I enabling this client right now, or am I actually empowering them? And that was a question that I asked myself all the time. Am I enabling myself right now, or am I empowering myself? So am I enabling myself, for anyone that doesn't know, am I enabling myself to basically stay stuck, stay where I am, stay attached, stay connected to this person, believe I need this person to be, am I enabling myself to just stay where I fucking am? Or actually am I empowering myself to grow and develop and change? And I think that's one of my biggest lessons as a coach. And it's interesting you said about trauma-informed coaching, because it's something I'm looking at doing, subject to what I decide to do next, obviously, the appropriateness of what I decide to do next. But it's really understanding that trauma is not reserved for the few who have been through horrific things, because ironically, the ones who've been through the horrific things are the ones that had the central nervous system to hold the horrific thing in the first place, and then likely went and did the work because it was so horrific. For me, it's the subliminal things that eat away at us every single day in small ways, and just chip, chip, chip. That is what my experience of my central nervous system collapse has been.
Think about gaslighting and narcissism, emotional abuse, there's so many types of abuse that are so subtle. The amount of people that don't even realize they're at the end of it, all of that is an effect on your nervous system. You only have to look at COVID and how that affected it. That was like a massive collective global thing. Every single person in the world experienced trauma from that. Not one person will have not, on some level. Perhaps not as like catastrophic, but on some level, just whether it was because you agreed with it and you were scared, or whether you disagreed with it and felt in the minority and on ostracized, like, you know, that every single person, that it's just at what depth does that impact our nervous system,
Totally.
depending
And this
on our
brings me
capability.
back to what we were saying at the beginning about the collective consciousness.
Yes, I'm so ready to share this with you.
Okay, so it's funny because basically, so Nikki she'd written down and she'd written on a piece of paper that she was going to talk about collective consciousness. And I said to her at the beginning, I said, I just really believe right now that, you know, people were talking about gut health 7 years ago, and that was the new faddy thing, and now it's everywhere. I believe central nervous system restoration and regulation is going to be like everyone I talk to who's in the same kind of sphere as me, or like striving for similar level goals, or in masterminds, is all doing the same work. And I was like, that's not a fucking coincidence. There's a book by a woman called Peter Kelly called Earth is Hiring. And in this book, she says that she believes Mother Earth knows what it needs. And that in every generation of babies born, they are born, it's not a coincidence, they're born with the same, when they get to 19, they all want the same things. They're generationally all the same. Now, you could argue that's the environment they're born into and what they grow up in, but equally, you could argue that's what they're born with. And so I do not believe it's a coincidence that a lot of business leaders, people in the personal development space, people in the empowerment space, people in the inspirational space, I don't know what other word to use, are all going through certain central nervous system regulation. And likely what will happen is a boom and a quantum for those people, because they will then make people become aware of the necessity of that. And to me, that's not a coincidence that this is something so many of us are working through right now. So with that in mind, I'd love for you to talk a little bit into collective consciousness before we close out.
Collective consciousness is a thing because it comes back to that vibration, really. We are all energy. We are all vibrating. We connect one to another. Whether it's Reiki is transmitted from one person to another, whether it's the empathic person. I know there's an element of trauma response with empaths where they can be on hyper alert, so they're really hyper aware of what is happening. But essentially, we all feel, I sometimes use this example. If you were in a pitch black house and no one was in and you couldn't hear, and someone walked in the room, you would feel their energy. You would know that, right? Another example, in these events, I always notice a theme. Even if people come with different intentions, I always notice a theme. The first time I noticed it really strongly actually was the spring equinox last year. I'd picked up on it before, but this was like the clearest version of it. I had the most wildest sexual weekends, and I had gone on a date on the Friday, had the most amazing time, just really connected with this person and had the time of my life until 3 a.m. And then I was doing a dance event in London where I went to this dance event as a participant. And it was so empowering. There was so much, like, just everything I needed to shift was like coming out. The music couldn't have been better. Like, everything. I had such an emotional release out of it. I felt so sexually liberated in myself. It was a real pinnacle of me connecting with myself, who I am, accepting my queerness, like everything that I've been journeying towards. And then on the Sunday morning, I taught orgasmic yoga online, which is basically, it's like it's a somatic class where you invite people to connect with the body, and it's a space where arousal is welcome, and you invite people, whether it can be there, it may not be there, but you're using breath work to help people connect with their sexuality, connect with their genitals, to connect with the parts. Like, it's a bit like I said earlier, sexuality in the personal development world and therapeutic world is often like shoved in this box because it's so like still held in this kind of shame bubble. But actually, when we really embrace it, it's so powerful. Literally, our sexual energy is life force energy. So I did this amazing class and it was just really beautiful. And then I taught spring equinox sound bath with Cacao. We did some ecstatic dance movement. And I kept getting messages afterwards. Like, I was also, I'm not gonna lie, I was feeling pretty hot from my Friday night still. And I kept getting these messages where people had had really sexual experiences. I've never had it before, but I just had such a wildly liberating, healing weekend. And I think I was probably just vibrating that really loudly, but then it invited everyone else's higher consciousness into there. I never once mentioned anything like about it. Literally was no different really from the spring equinox when you came. You know, we didn't talk about sex, we didn't talk about sexual liberation, like nothing. It literally was somatic practices, inviting people in to connect with their body. And I never like to guide people. So I think it's not good practice to assume that if you say connect to your, I don't know, just never assume what someone might be feeling in their body, or assume that their attention is in one place just because yours is. So I try and be quite open-ended with my descriptions and words, and how I invite people into their physical connections self. But yeah, literally it was just such a profound example. Every single person's was different. This time the energy of leading up to this really felt like it was still a hibernation mode, and it was still people were still wanting to cocoon. I felt that energy really strongly. We weren't quite ready. We've not had that kind of bright sunny March like we had, say, like 2020. We had that really hot spring, early spring, didn't we? Whereas still now it's kind of a bit dark and rainy and windy. And actually so many people were feeding back around the fears that they were releasing. I don't know if you noticed that, but so many people in the circle, and a few messages I've had since. And I just thought it really...
Oh yeah, it was all the same. It was, but what's so weird is none of us knew each other.
Yeah, no one knew each other. No one knew what each other's intentions were. We don't share before. We do an opening circle. So the structure of the event is invite everyone in, opening circle, cacao, noble silence throughout, go into movement. So you're staying in your kind of, I create the what is safe for people kind of environment, and then into movement, then sound, and then only at the end do we share. And yeah, so no one knows.
Yeah, it was so powerful at the end as well, and just like hearing everyone kind of say very not similar things, but similar energy. And like, you're so right, like I really thought that by this point in the year I would be in a different energy state than I am. And it's like I said, I'm getting ready to be ready, but I can feel that it's kind of like but it is, and I definitely think it's connected to weather, and I'm off to Marbella next week, so I'm looking forward to some glorious sunshine to open me up. But it was honestly just a really interesting experience, and I would strongly recommend it to anybody that is on a journey of healing and growth and wants to get to know, even if it's just you want to get to know yourself more, and have that quiet space and holding space. Like you said, it's really hard to describe it, but holding space for me feels like I do this movement. To me feels like holding space. Like I am holding space for this conversation right now. There's nothing else in my periphery. This is what's here. This is where I am. And so even if you just want to be somewhere where the energy in the room is holding space for healing, and you want to be part of that, I would recommend it, if nothing else, because I believe that the rooms, the energy, the environments we spend our time in is the biggest indicator of where we're going to end up. Nothing to do with how hard we work or where we're from or our background or any of those things. I believe that where we spend our time, energy, emotion, the environment we spend it in is what dictates the next. This is why I love events, full stop. Speaking events, inspiring events, conferences, concerts, theatre, it doesn't matter. The collective consciousness, the collective energy in that room changes your vibration. And this is why when people go to, like, you know, we're probably both big fans of Joe Dispenza, you know, a lot of people go to his events, they will, like, you know, have no symptoms from Parkinson's, they'll be able to walk, and they've been in a wheelchair, and all these things happen, and they go back to their home, and they go back to their environment, and their environment cues everything about their life, their brain, their programming, and they can't walk again. And it's because they've gone back to their environment. And so your environment is so fucking important if you want to change. And so if you want to actually heal, you need to be in healing environments. And so events like yours are exactly that.
Yeah. And like who you spend your time with, what is your home like? Like you haven't been to this house yet, but I hold conscious sexuality events here, and every person that comes in is always like amazed about the space. And the reason for that is I really strongly believe that your home is literally, it's like it's reflecting back to you everything. I know there's limitations for some people on, or maybe, I mean, it's probably like the worst language to use, because there's privilege, that's what there is, rather than limitation. And but it's such a reflection. Like here the colors are sumptuous and dark, and it's different textures, and there's like sparkly things, and all of the things I wanted to reflect back on actually like sensual, empowering, like just that make you feel amazing. So I just always encourage everyone to create their home to be like the bubble that they want to feel. And then you look at your friends, and then then you look at your work. You know, there's always ways that you can choose to make your environment powerful for yourself.
Yeah, and whatever energy you want to be in. So like, for example, I put these frames up the other day. I've moved my office around, like shifted it so I'm looking out the window rather than this way to the window. And like we put these frames up and they say she's electric, because that's my energy is electric. I'm like, if you hear me speak on stage, you may just say you may be hearing me speak somewhere very soon, and it's very exciting. I'm like an electric person. I'm like, when you turn me on, I'm like, boom, we go. Like there's no like warm up. I'm in. So then you've got easy tiger, because I say that I love saying that to people, like, easy tiger, and that also feels quite a sexual phrase to me. And it kind of like, sometimes I'd say that to Josh and like have a little laugh. And then so Josh says to me, oh hey you, that's what he says to me. So it's kind of like, again, a really fun playful energy. And then this one says, now I don't like the phrase of this when it's used, but it says good vibes only. Right now, I don't believe in, I'll be really clear, that's not a belief system, good vibes only. This space is a good vibe only space. Only when I am in a good vibration am I going to sit at my desk, create content, record a podcast, put content out, because I'm not serving the world if I step into this space in any shitty vibration.
That's so brilliant, because I literally have one that says good vibes behind me. And actually I crossed it out and I wrote fuck toxic positivity.
I knew you were going to say that. This is the thing. But you know, like I said, when I actually won these in a competition on Instagram. So I won a whole house. And so I was like, when I got them, I was like, they're the 4 for this space. In fact, there were 2 more, but they don't fit. But this one is, this space is good vibration only, rather than toxic positivity.
And it's so interesting because I like do like what might be classed as like the shadowy aspects. So I'm like, I want you to feel all of that stuff that is in there, and I want to shine light on it so it's accepted and it's welcome. So I'm like, let it all out. Let me see what you think is your shadow. Let me see your darkness.
Which I love, but I'm that person that wants to. Isn't this funny that we do different things but the same? Whereas I'm like, let me get your vibration up. Spend half an hour with me, and I'm going to get you pumped or get you really good. Then you're going to go, oh, I feel really good. What happened? You spent time with good people. Your people suck, basically.
I do the same from a different standpoint. The other ones say, let go of the thoughts that don't serve you, or it said, let go of the thoughts that don't make you strong, and I crossed it out and made it that don't serve you. And the other one is always bring your own sunshine, which I crossed out and put, you are sunshine.
Oh, I love it. Well, what a lovely way to end it. So thank you so much, babe, for joining me, and thank you for hosting an amazing event and for holding space for us all. I know everybody had a transformational experience in their own way. So that was, as always, the way that we see it. I will drop all Nikki's details, links, handles, and her recommendation for a triangle for my office down in the links below. But babe, thank you so much for joining me.
Always a pleasure, my love.